Last week we did the 20th verse. Bhagavad Gita Kinchita Dhita Ganga Jalalava Kanika Pita Sakradapi Yena Murari Samarcha Kriyate Tasya Yamena Na Charcha. He puts it very beautifully in their own contemporary language. A person has no contention with Yama. Contention with Yama, Yama means the Lord of Death. Someone who doesn't have any dispute with Yama. You must understand birth and death, the cycle. In fact, the next verse we're going to go through that. The cycle of birth and death only brings about a change in your environment. Birth and death brings about a change in your embodiment. Birth and death brings about a change in your circumstances. You must only understand philosophically, death means birth, means change. Now, if you understand, if you go along with the thought of birth and death, if you look at life, in fact, one of the very basic definitions of life is actually defined as an anubhava dhara. An anubhavam is nothing but an experience that you go through in life, any experience for that matter. And a dhara means a flow, means a beautiful continuity. The experiences from your morning till this moment, you can say that has precisely defined your life. So the experiences go about creating your life, maintaining your life, defining your life. Now, when you go from one experience to another, when there is a death of the first experience, there arises the birth of the second experience. Now, pardon me for the language, I'm just borrowing the concept of birth and death. When there's a death of one, there's a birth of the other. So when the first experience dies, the second experience is born. When the second experience dies, the third experience is born, and so on and so forth. So each experience has a distinct environment, a distinct flavor. It brings about a distinct aspect of your personality to interact. Now, this is an experience between you and those who are seekers of this knowledge. You're interacting with the Guru on the subject Bhaja Govindam. So this is an experience. Prior to this, perhaps you had another experience. The lady in the house perhaps had to prepare the meal well in advance so that she's available for this session, so that the family has the supper right on time. That was another experience. Prior to that, there was another experience, so on and so forth. So that birth and death of experiences creates your life. Now, what does this change of experiences do? They create certain amount of pain, a certain amount of ability on you. It demands you to be able to adapt to the change, isn't it? If you are not able to adapt to the change, that change of experiences causes a certain amount of pain, a certain amount of agitation. So bring that concept to the verse. Here he says, you have no dispute. A person has no dispute with the Lord of Death. Means someone who has conquered change. So if you understand, if you have been following the thought, change means suffering, which means there is something that is changeless. You can only perceive a change. Remember this. You can only perceive a change from a changeless platform. If you are on a railway platform, you can see the train arriving onto the platform, and you can see a train leaving the platform. You can see a change around you because you are stationary. You are the changeless. So from your changeless platform, you can examine a change that's happening around you. I remember this very interesting experience as a child. When you are in the train and you're at the platform, and on the neighboring platform also is another train. And for interesting experience that both the trains, it does happen sometimes, rarely, that both the trains decide or were scheduled to leave at the same time, and both the trains leave in the same direction in the respective tracks. And I remember as a kid looking at that, suddenly you feel the jerk of the train has left or started to leave. And when you look at one side, you find nothing is happening. And you look at the other side, you find there's movement. Have you ever experienced that? And if you ever experience that, you'll realize what I'm talking about. So with reference to the neighboring train, which is also left at the same time, in the same direction, both are changeless. But with reference to the platform, you are changing. So you can perceive the change. So to perceive any change, there must be the changeless platform. So talking in the context of this, the goal of human life, the purpose of life is to reach that state of the changeless equilibrium. To hit that state where you become changeless means you remain unaffected by anything. And how do you get to that? The 20th verse spoke about the three spiritual disciplines, the three main spiritual practices which form the main spiritual journey. In fact, 98%, 95% plus your spiritual journey is spent on these three: karma, bhakti, jnana. A quick mention. He says, Bhagavad Gita kinchidadhita. Very little of Bhagavad Gita. The implication is the accent is on digesting the knowledge. The accent is on making the knowledge your own, rather than merely be content by merely acquiring information. It's not how well informed you are, how truly transformed, how much of your knowledge translates and trickles down into your life. How much do you walk the talk? That's important, and that's determined by the process of digesting the knowledge, not just merely inform. That's what he says. How much knowledge is required for you to transform you? Kinchit. Very little. You don't need volumes of literature. You've mastered it all, but no use. What you need, little bit of digestion. And then he says, drink a drop of Ganges symbolizes bhakti, and then worshipping Murari once refers to karma. So wherever there is a feeling of devotion we explained is an attitude of gratefulness, an attitude of thankfulness. So bhakti is thanking the Lord for all he has showered onto you. So when you thank the Lord, you become grateful, and wherever there is that feeling of identification, you start expressing it with service. Like when you love your family, when that love is pure, you express that love by serving them. You provide for them. You go out of the way sacrificing for their well-being. So service is an expression of bhakti. So when you do karma, bhakti, jnanam, you will reach a mental state where the change of the world will not affect you. In fact, it is not wrong to say another word for the world is change. Nothing in the world remains static. So synonym for the world is change. So how does the world affect you? In the 12th chapter of the Gita, the very beautiful chapter Bhakti Yoga, in that he talks of a quality of a devotee of God. There he says one of the qualities of a devotee is he who is not agitated by the world. Now, how many of us can claim to have nadvijate lokaha, one who is not agitated by the world? Agitated means you're not affected by the world, so the world doesn't seem to have a toll on you. You will reach that state. That's what he says. He who has no dispute with Yama means you become the changeless. All right. So that was a quick recap of what was covered. So let's move on. We'll take up verse 21. The very, very famous verse. Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani, jathare shayanam, iha samsare, bahudustare, kripaya pare, pahi murare. Again, punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani, jathare shayanam, iha samsare, bahudustare, kripaya pare, pahi murare. Outstanding verse, a very, very beautiful message. In fact, the title, each verse, as you know, has been given a title. The title of this verse is the bondage of life. So here the translation reads, again taking birth, again death, and again lying in the mother's womb. Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi, punaha means again, once again, punaha api, jathare shayanam, lying in the mother's womb. This samsara, iha samsare, bahudustare, kripaya pare, pahi murare. This terrestrial entanglement is unending. It's rather difficult to cross, it's hard to cross. O Murare, O Krishna, please save through thy grace. It's all thy grace. What am I? I'm insignificant. What are my efforts? What do you call them? Lilliputs. My effort is Lilliputian. What can I do? What can I achieve? What am I compared to the totality? Who am I? I'm insignificant. In fact, it is very, very interesting sometimes to put yourself against the backdrop of totality. We just really understand how insignificant we are, how insignificant our life is, and further to it, how insignificant our problems are. When you yourself are insignificant, what are the problems of your life? But we have made a mountain of our problems, a mountain of our life, because we think we are everything and our life is everything. When you look at you against the backdrop of totality, if you ever go to, at some point, all of us always have gone to the planetarium. When you go to the planetarium, it really hits you if you have this perspective, if you have this perception. When you sit back, when you put your head back to the seat and look up, you have the dome which projects the galaxy, the Milky Way, the vastness, which really hits you. And then everything seems to be very, very alien terms, something there, the stars, and so much that's there beyond your understanding. And then it brings you down to the galaxy, our Milky Way, and then they bring into that's a small pocket or a dot is our Milky Way, and then they expand it, that becomes your planetary system, and then they expand it, comes the planet Earth, and then they expand it, and then they take it further from there. If the planet Earth is actually a small dot in that huge cosmos, if that planet Earth is a dot, then where is the Asian continent? Then where is the India as a country with over 1 billion people? Remember, the Earth itself is a speck, a mere dust particle in the huge cosmos. And then comes the continent, the country, the state you belong to, the city where you reside, the locality where you are, and your house, and you, the master. I am the boss. Who is this 6 feet or 5 feet, 6-inch fellow? What are you? Who am I compared to that huge cosmos or totality? Insignificant. And what do you think our efforts can achieve? So, in utter devotion, in utter surrender, he says this, O Murare, because you understand that This is a journey beyond your limited capacity. How much ever you put in effort, you will find yourself, you need the divine grace. You need that blessings of the totality to make things happen. Nothing happens on your own. So he invokes that blessing of the Lord to be liberated from the bondage of not this birth, the bondage which has been going on from when? Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam. It has been going on again and again for, in fact, you can say time immemorial. Don't know when it started. Long, long ago. So this verse is a direct connection to the thought flow from the previous verse. If you do not follow what was said in verse 20, you will be subjected through this, which is the cycle of birth and death. So this is the consequence, the price you pay for not following what was said in the previous verse. Now, for some of you who have joined us a little later, there is this term, the term known as Pratipaksha Bhavana. Now, let me type it out for you all who may not be able to pick it up. Pratipaksha Bhavana. Now, Pratipaksha Bhavana is a unique approach which is taken in the text. Now, what is Pratipaksha Bhavana? A capacity to re-evaluate things, an intellectual capacity to re-evaluate things and look at it from a totally different perspective. An intellectual capacity to re-evaluate and look at it from a totally different perspective. That is Pratipaksha Bhavana. Now, in the beginning, we had seen Pratipaksha Bhavana to acquisition. We have seen Pratipaksha Bhavana to enjoyment. Pratipaksha Bhavana to name, etc. Now, here, he gives Pratipaksha Bhavana to life. Here, we are looking at how these great masters look at our lives. They are saying, you are going through repeated birth, repeated death, lying in the mother's womb. Now, primarily, I'm short of being certain that none of us have an objection to that. Do we? You would say, so what is wrong in being born? Isn't it a joyful occasion to celebrate birth? And it's always very sad to mourn. We mourn death. When somebody passes away, we feel sorrowful. We mourn. So what's our approach to life is we celebrate birth and we mourn death. So what is the Pratipaksha Bhavana of a Mahatma to this simple approach or perception to life? Now, it's more than that. I'm just saying from a distance, when you look at life, we celebrate life, we celebrate birth and mourn death. In fact, Mahatmas, they mourn birth and celebrate death. Now, if that makes some sense to you, please hold on to it. I do not know. It's very difficult to convey because I'm not one of them. I'm only trying to understand. What they do is they celebrate death and they mourn birth. Strange as it may sound, for some of you coming in for the first time, who is this chap? It doesn't make sense. What am I listening? What is he talking? Sir, philosophically, you must understand, death is nothing but spiritual evolution. You must understand that. Death is considered as spiritual evolution. Birth is considered as spiritual devolution. As strange as it may sound, but someone who is acquainted with the works will find it quite plausible, quite acceptable. How do we say that? Now, how do you say birth is spiritual devolution? Now, why does somebody take birth? What is it that determines birth? Why is one subjected to birth? What you must understand is birth happens only when you have vasanas to exhaust. Vasanas are nothing but, if you don't understand what vasanas are, you must understand it is like the fuel in your petrol, in your tank, your petrol in your fuel, or petrol or fuel in your tank of your vehicle. You need that petrol or fuel to drive the vehicle, and the vehicle will have movement, there is motion as long as there's fuel to drive it, isn't it? But the moment the fuel dies away, there is no further movement, there is no further propulsion. Simple analogy. So when a person is born because he has the fuel to burn out. He has the vasanas or desires. And understood, when a person has burnt those vasanas during the course of his life's journey, when those vasanas are exhausted, he shall die. Now, how do we say, if this be true, how do we say that evolution of spiritual evolution is death? Means you have got rid of a certain bundle of vasanas out of your system, which means you have got yourself closer to that goal of realization, the goal of knowing thyself. The goal of realization, self-realization or God realization, is known as a state of vasanalessness, a state of no vasanas. So through the sheer progression of life, you are guaranteed you would have exhausted your vasanas and you would have reached that state of human perfection, which is self-realization. Now, but don't think it is as simple as that. Now, as we all are known, we are known as a race, as a human, to complicate things in life. So if we follow life as it meant to be, there'll be no issue. The problem is we go about complicating things. So in the course of life, we create quite a mess with ourselves. So we keep adding more vasanas. So it's like every 100 kilometers you drive, you keep refueling your tank. You make sure your tank is full. Similarly, throughout the course of your journey, you keep accumulating fresh desires. So the cycle of birth and death seems to go on unending. That is what the verse is complaining. In fact, as I've said, the verse is talking about bondage. And if you understand the verse is said with a little bit of pain. The master is talking with a little bit of, you must feel that sense of agony in him. The voice is very heavy with emotion of pain and agony. He feels sorry for the state of mankind. How long would you go on being bound to the cycle of birth and death, man? Don't you experience a sense of bondage? Now, I would like to ask you all, do you all feel bound by this birth of your, or by the experience what you're going through? Do you find life binding you, or does your life's experiences liberate you? Anything for that matter. I am talking at the broad spectrum of life. Even, in fact, you go into the unit experiences of your life, every experience. Is that experience binding you or liberating you? Is your job binding you or liberating you? Is your family binding you or liberating you? Is the social service you're doing binding you or liberating you? Is anything that you do, anything that you're doing, what is that it does to you? So if you look at life, everything seems to be a bondage. Everything seems to be limiting, constricting, confining. So the verse talks with a little bit of heavy heart. He says that with a heavy heart, man, how long would you want to lie in the mother's womb again and again, birth and again you go through this, man? It's very difficult to cross. Understandable, it's not easy. But do you realize the bondage? You know, primarily you must be able to at least understand or appreciate the sentiment of theirs. You know, as evolution goes, if you look back at history, at the previous generations, We all have evolved from a microorganism, isn't it? We've all evolved from there, and then we've evolved into various beings, various forms have taken over generations, over many, many births. We have come into a birth of an ape, and then from there we have evolved to a human. So what the Shastras say, to be born as a human being in itself, you have gone through a very long cycle of birth and death. Do you realize that? Do you even have the capacity to conceive what price have you paid to be fortunate enough to be born as a human being? Because if you compare a human birth to other living organisms, other living beings, a human birth vis-a-vis other beings is almost 1:infinite. Countless other beings are there compared to a human birth. What's the life of a mosquito? What's the life of a beetle? What's the life of a bird or a beast? What's the life of a microorganism? They also go through birth, they also go through change, they also die, there's also life in them. Countless. So it's very, very fortunate that you're born as a human being. You would say, your reaction is, sir, why are you talking all this? I don't see anything great with it. Big deal. What is so great being born as a human? In fact, I'm cursing myself. Whenever I look at certain other animal kingdom, I start admiring. Look at them, so beautiful they are, so lovely their lives, isn't it? Sometimes I keep saying, I'm someone who's very addicted, short of addiction to these certain channels. If at all, I watch very limited television, and I watch a lot of this National Geographic or Animal Planet, or those kind of documentaries. Really, I'm fascinated with it, and I'm very much in love with how these people bring those vivid and candid moments of this beautiful animal kingdom. And when you sit back and you look at them, I say, wow, look at that beautiful penguin, or that life of or any of that, the wildness and the wilderness and the purity and the nature, the photography, and how rich and how beautiful their lives are. Maybe somewhere deep within, I'm sick and tired of human life, and I want to be born as a animal. And I better watch out, because the law says whatever you desire, you'll get it. So maybe next birth I will be born as a beautiful parrot or a peacock or I don't know, something out there. I do not know. So it will be a little detour from my human journey. So human birth is in fact your top of the chain in terms of human evolution. Now, a small percentage of humanity understand the price they have paid. And these great masters had their own way of communicating this. So there was a Swami who was understood by his devotees. His devotees or his students understood the greatness of that man. An elderly person, very unassuming. His devotees understood what profound wisdom he had. One day, suddenly he found missing in the ashram. He was not to be seen. The students thought that maybe something urgent had cropped up, he had to leave. And they waited for a few days. They had to dig deep patiently for 2 weeks, because this has never happened before. The Swami missing, and without a note, they were concerned, where is the Swami? How long to wait? And slowly they started inquiring the whereabouts of the Swami. Nobody has heard. Nobody knows where he has gone. Even those who are very close proximity to him, who handle his works, didn't know. He didn't mention anything to anyone. So they got a little restless. And soon they created a search party and went in search for the Swami. And their search took them to different corners of the city, of the villages, because they knew their Swami was very peculiar. He's not an ordinary person because he had his own way of communicating things. And meanwhile, this man, the Swami, went into a remote village, one corner of country, and he was with his tattered clothes, unshaven beard, unassuming. He used to literally live on alms, whatever people gave him. He was more than happy. So he found a place under a tree, a deserted area where he could just sleep at night or take rest. And whatever help the villagers did give him, he was happy with that. But the villagers found something very peculiar. What he used to do is every morning he was living near a little mountainous area. Every morning what he would do is he will start pushing a boulder. Now can you imagine just climbing a mountain? Humongous task, isn't it? But here this man used to push a boulder from the foothills of the mountain till the peak. And this humongous exercise would literally take most of the day, from sunrise to sunset. He would begin his exercise first thing in the morning, and he will slog and slog and slog. He'll reach that peak by the end of the day. And having reached, he catches a breath or two, he kicks the boulder, and he sees the boulder rolling down the mountain. He has a heart full of laugh. He laughs and laughs and laughs. Comes back slowly walking down. Some food is kept there for him. He'll eat. He'll sleep. And that would give him enough energy for the ritual to follow next morning. Which is start pushing the boulder right up to the mountain, the peak. Push it down the mountain. Laugh to heart's content. Come back, eat and sleep. And this has been going on for a few weeks. For a month. And the only thing villagers thought, this fellow is a mad fellow. What sort of a madness is this fellow? Only thing is, they were never disturbed. He never came and interrupted or disturbed their life. They said, okay, this fellow is a mad fellow. Let us provide for him. And he used to carry that life. Now, meanwhile, the students came in search and they asked, have you found a man of such description? Now these people were well presented, they all were like a swamis, very spiritual. But they thought, I don't think we have seen any guru who will fit to your description. But we know there's one mad fellow who's doing all these peculiar things. They immediately said, can you please take us to him? And there they found their revered Swami, very busy with the works. So they all stood at a distance, seeing all the drama with the villagers around there. And they waited until he came back after that exercise which he went through day after day. The moment they saw him, they were so touched to have had the darshan again. They fell at his feet and asked, Swami, what is going on? What is your message to mankind? Please tell us. And then he actually, perhaps he would have referred to this verse or explained the theme. So what he was trying to say is, do you guys realize how much effort you have put in to be born as a human? Is exactly like the exercise I go through to push the boulder from the foothills right up to the peak of the mountain. Having come this far, having put in all that effort to come as a human being, and having come to this stage, what are you doing? You're just kicking away the boulder, kicking away the opportunity of life and having a laugh of your life, getting caught up in certain excitements. You're getting excited with what? Acquisition, enjoyment. What are you wasting your life over the frivolities of life? All what you want to do in life is to acquire and enjoy. Buddhamate, oh fool, realize that. Realize the potential of what a human being is designed for. And he was conveying this, how you are wasting all that you have invested to come to this pinnacle. A human birth is meant to realize yourself. You're only born with the purpose to realize yourself. Without investing your thought, time and energy into that, Why are you getting distracted by all the non-essentials, man? And that spirit that Swami was conveying, hardly nobody understood. His disciples understood the greatness of the message. So you need to have a certain acumen. You need to have a certain mindset to perceive life as bondage, to be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. And that is what is the theme, that is what is the crux of this message. To go through the cycle of birth and death is not something which is pleasurable. It's not something which I would want to go to. If you ask me, sir, what is your plan? My plan is, I don't want to come back to the cycle. It may happen, it may not happen. But that is my very clear goal. I will strive hard, I will struggle, I will put all I have got into this. Every drop of blood and sweat will go into this thought of fructifying the thought. I don't want to be born again. I want to get to that goal. I want to fulfill the purpose of life. That's what the Upanishad says. Iha cheta vedi data satyamasti. Nacheti ha vedim mahati vinashti. Bhuteshu bhuteshu vichitra dhiraha pretyasma lokad amruta bhavanti. The very famous verse in the Upanishad. It says, Iha cheta vedi data satyamasti. If you have fulfilled the purpose for which you are born, satyamasti. Satyam. You have lived a life of truthfulness. Nacheti ha vedim mahati vinashti. If you have not succeeded, your life is a vinashti. Not just vinashti, mahati vinashti. Nashti is loss. You're going through a certain loss. Vinashti, oh, I've gone through a terrible loss. All my stocks are gone. I've lost all my investments. That's quite a big loss. Nashti is loss. Vinashti, supreme loss. Mahati vinashti, supreme, most of supreme losses. Now, what am I talking about here? I want you to respond to this question. What am I talking about here? Mahati vinashti, supreme, most of supreme losses. He gives it in a superlative sense, not just an ordinary loss. It's not that you have lost your pen, you have lost your phone. It's not that you have lost your wallet. It's not that you have lost your stocks. It's not that you have lost your dear ones. It is the greatest of all losses. So what am I talking about? What is the scripture? What is the verse talking about? What are the Upanishads talking about? What loss is this? Sai says very beautifully, lost an opportunity to make this life meaningful. Very true. How many of us can celebrate life? How many of us can truly, wholeheartedly say that we have done justice to the very purpose of life? Absolutely. Vasanti says, realizing the self. Lakshmi Ma also says, Annapurna Sridharji says that the purpose of life. Absolutely. I think all of you are resonating well. Dharini ji also says that it is the very purpose of life. Now, one thing is to know it. One thing is to be acquainted with the truth. It is yet another thing to embark on it. It is yet another thing to be consumed by that fire. The fire of the goal must surely consume you. It is yet another thing. I am not denying, I am not making it exclusive to a certain class of people, not at all. I believe it is there in you to make it happen. But I'm only trying to resonate that thought of a commitment. See, your primary objective, your primary obligation in life is to realize yourself. This is what the Shastras say. Now, how many of us have If I ask you what's your priorities in life, what's the most important thing in life, what is that really matters to you? If I would say your family, your resources, your job, your social life, your sport life, you may be a sportsman, you have your engagements, you have your uh, various other interests of yours, and you're also interested in spiritual knowledge or spiritual goal. Where would you put this? It's like asking this question or answering this question. What is your answer to this question? I would say, or the statement, oxygen is important for one's survival. Can you please examine that statement and clarify what's wrong with that statement? Oxygen is important for one's survival. What's wrong with that statement? It is not oxygen is important, my dear. Oxygen is survival. Now, if you don't understand what that is, you just extend your pranayama for a little longer. You hold both your nostrils, you exhale your breath and clamp both your nostrils. Close them with your mouth shut, hold it for a little longer. Then you understand what this means. Oxygen is not important for your survival, sir. Oxygen is survival. It is not even important, it is essential. You can't live without it. All I can say, proudly I can say, and there's nothing wrong, and I'm not being egoistic when I say that I have made this cause the very survival of my life. I have succeeded in that. Whether I can be a failure in reaching the goal, but I have succeeded in making it as oxygen of my life. My life, my actions, everything in life is firmly rooted to fulfill and justify this objective, that life is this. Everything else is secondary, is redundant. Satyam asti, mahati vinashti. If you don't do that, it's vinashti. But ihacheta vedi data satyam asti. The Shastras say, if you go about living your life this way, satyam asti. Satyam is to live a life of truthfulness. So this verse is actually creating that very refined perception to life, that pratipaksha bhavana. How do masters look at life? They look at life as a lot of pain. Now, let me be very clear. So, the cycle of birth and death is a lot of pain. Now, what is the phase of life? What is the various stages of life? Which, as I've said, there's a lot of pain involved. So, what are the various stages of life? The 5 metamorphic changes of life. Every human being, will like it or not, go through these stages. Your life starts with birth. Now, birth is the most painful exercise. Ask the mother, ask the child, you may not remember, but it is a lot of pain for you and the mother, isn't it? When you were born, apparently even Charlie Chaplin and Robin Williams also cried. Those who made laugh people throughout their lives, they themselves cried. So start your life, start your journey with your cry. And in fact, people celebrate when they hear your cry. Everything is well. Then you start distributing sweets. Look at that, see, we celebrate birth, they celebrate death. Now don't go about literally doing it. You'll land in trouble, you land me in trouble. Please don't. Oh, my neighbor has passed away due to COVID, therefore I'm celebrating, distributing sweets. Please don't do that. or it's not meant in that spirit, it's meant in a philosophical sense. So birth, no, don't get me wrong. When I said your neighbor passed away of COVID, I'm just saying it, just a light-hearted note. I said, no, you wouldn't want anybody to die, but yet it's an inevitable aspect of life. Whatever be the ways, whatever be the means, whatever be the instrument of death, death is a matter of fact. I have to accept death. I have to embrace death gracefully. But the thought of dying is very, very painful. The insecurity it creates in life is very, very painful, is agonizing. You go through enormous torture, the very thought of death coming close to you. People are getting paranoid because of this virus. Not that you shouldn't be concerned or you should be callous, but there's no need to get paranoid. There is no need to lose your sense of normalcy. Go about freely with great caution, with great care. So just coming back to it, birth is suffering, growth, constant suffering. Growth is pain, disease is pain, decay is pain, death, the thought of death, the journey to death is pain. Now tell me which aspect of your life there is joy in it. It's not me to take a certain approach. I'm just examining what life is. This is what they are saying. Every phase of life is pain. Therefore, I don't want to be subjected to this cycle again and again. O Murare, O Lord, please save me through thy grace. You know, the Guru plays a very, very important role. But therefore, thank you, sir. Thereafter, I will delegate my spiritual evolution to the Guru. You can't do that. There was a very wealthy businessman, a very wealthy man. He was sick, very sick, and his personal doctor was coming to home to attend to him. And he knew what exactly the problem was because he's been a long patient of his. He said, no worry, you just follow the medical prescription to the T. If you do that, I would say perhaps another 10 days to 2 weeks max, you should be able to get back to a certain normalcy of your life. But till then, you've got to do everything that I tell you. You need utmost rest, follow the prescription. So, yes, sir, certainly. And he also told him that you've got to start pulling yourself out of your lethargy and start doing some exercise. You know, you've got to do this. Apart from medicine, it's just not sitting and taking these pills and syrups. You've got to start working on your health. You do this exercise every day. So whatever doctor you say, you know, I surrender to you. Like here he says, I surrender to Murari, he surrendered to the Lord, to the doctor. Doctor said, yes, wonderful. He paid a visit after a week. And to his surprise, there was not much of a difference in his health. He was a little concerned. He said, never mind. He asked, are you doing everything that you said? Yes, sir. I'm doing everything, doctor, you have said. Okay. Maybe you need to change the dosage and little this. Maybe that will work for you. And he does little change and leaves. And he said, come back after 10 days now. He comes back after 10 days. No change. And then he got suspicious. He asks him, my dear, can you tell me what exactly are you doing? And when he inquired, he came to know that this fellow, the businessman, he had a lot of staff in the house and who were not doing much because not much work for them. So what he did, he started delegating things to him, to each one. More importantly, he started delegating the exercise part to one of his servants. And he said, you better do exercise for me. He said, master, whatever you say, because you are giving me salary and I'm your servant, I'll serve you. So the servant was actually doing every day whatever exercise the master was supposed to do, he was doing. The end result is the servant has become like an ox. He's become healthy. The master is still bedridden. So you can't start delegating your reformation to others. You can't start delegating your transformation to others. No guru can help you evolve. A guru is just a signpost. Don't hang him somewhere. Huh? Oh, thank you, sir. Guru is signpost, therefore I'll make a picture of him and hang everywhere. That is not what I meant. Guru is a signpost means he is a symbol. He is someone who gives you direction. He can't walk that path for you. He's already tread that path. He's already reached that certain stage of perfection. So he becomes a symbol of perfection for you. He is there to guide you, direct you, but he can't tread the path for you. Therefore, you got to understand, you got to take it upon yourself, your own transformation. You can't delegate it to others. Understand? So you got to understand the sentiment of what this verse is. Every phase of life goes through a certain journey which is painful, which is binding. All what you need to understand is through the progression of life, if you are able to get rid of your desires and vasanas. So what causes bondage is your vasanas. So if you use every phase of life as a means to get to your goal, not as a mere end in itself. Don't get into things as an end in itself. No. Everything is not end in itself. End in itself means, simple example, like you need food to eat, to live, sorry. You need to eat to live. But there are people who live just to eat. You need money for meeting your ends and making things happen for your life. But life is not just meant to make money. You need a family to give a little wholesomeness to your life. But that doesn't mean life is just driven and dedicated only for the family. Oh my God. I would say majority of people are just stuck to their family. Their family is everything for them. Their grandchildren are everything for them. Their spouses are everything for them. Their life is all revolves around their children and grandchildren, and they don't see anything beyond that. They are actually blindfolded. Who was it that is blindfolded in the Mahabharata? I am very weak at stories, so please forgive me. Correct. Jayama is our PS. We keep calling her PS. PS means Pradama Shishya. See, the one who's putting Namaskaram to you. Once again, do Namaskaram to everyone, not to me alone. Pradama Shishya she is one of the first and foremost students. One of the first. So she says, because the few who came before her are not present, she has promoted herself to the Pradama. So self is all a self given title. I never given title to her. She herself calls herself Pradama. So since I have no choice, I also call her PS, Pradama Shishya. So Pradama Shishya correctly answered Gandhari. Correct. Gandhari, what she did, she willingly blindfolded herself. Now, why am I talking of blindfolding? Krishnaswamy sir, can you please tell me why I suddenly spoke about Gandhari here? I have lost track. Don't say I was following you. I also lost track.
We lost the.
I'm sorry. Could you come again?
Internet connection.
I'm sorry. I think
we couldn't hear you.
Fair enough. Murari saved you here. So Lord Murari saved you. Internet connection saved you. Correct. No, what I was...
In between, we lost the internet.
I got it, sir. I got it. No problem. Now, as I rightly know, I was just trying to check. Not that I lost my thought flow. Correct, Sai. You said we all get into a family circle, but are you all blindfolded by the family? You all don't see anyone or anything beyond the family. No doubt your home should be the center of your love. Your home teaches you to love them. But family should not be the be all and end all of life, correct? It should not be, it's not what all life is meant to serve. So you got to envision a purpose beyond it. So everything you may go through, you should, if you want, please go through whatever life you want to experience, go through it. You want a little travel, travel the world to gain that experience. You want to experience sport, go and live a sportive life. You want to acquire wealth, go and acquire wealth. You want to do service, go and do service. You want to learn philosophy, go and learn philosophy. But everything in life is a means to that very end. That end is the purpose of life which they are talking about. But if you lose that perception and get caught up in life as an end in itself, then you miss the game of life. You have lost the game of life. And this is what the verse is saying. Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam. Let's chant this verse once again, please. It's a very, very, with the understanding you chant, perhaps you feel what the message is, what the verse is saying. Okay? Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani, jathare shayanam, यह संसारे बहुदुस्तारे कृपया पारे पाहि मुरारे पुनरपि जननं पुनरपि मरणं पुनरपि जननी जठरे शयनं यह संसारे बहुदुस्तारे कृपया पारे पाहि मुरारे. Let the feeling sink in. Let it percolate in every nerve, every cell of yours. Let it lift you. Let it regenerate you from inside out. So whether you take an intellectual angle like the interpretation we took intellectually, explaining why a birth is created, be the vasanas, what is the purpose, their priorities, to approach life as a means to an end, all this is an intellectual perception, an intellectual assessment, an intellectual interpretation, or you just say the devotional path, O Murare, please uplift me, please save me through thy grace. So whether you take the intellection or the devotion, the end perception is you want to be liberated in life, not being bound by life. Okay? A very, very famous, perhaps I would say, one of my favorite messages in the verses in the scriptures. Give it a special importance. Very, very famous. All right? Okay. Sudhakar Garu is, he commented, I would say Dhritarashtra, because he got blindfolded by the love of his kith and kin. He is double blindfolded. Yeah, he is born blind and he blindfolded by his love and attachment to his kith and kin. So very true, very true. Again, perhaps there's a message for us. So Shastras are only conveying a message to us. So when we look at certain characters played in certain these epics or stories, there's a message for mankind. So if we are able to every time look at the family, every time you relate the family, you must remind yourself, I don't want to be blindfolded by my love or my association with you. I will not sink in my love with you. I want to rise in my love with you. I rise and I lift you with you. It's not to sink in your attachments to your family and your limited circle. My home, my company, my job, my life, my problems. You will sink and you'll take them also along with you down. No, you evolve, you lift yourself, you lift the family, lift the society, lift your employees, you lift humanity. Other day I was introduced to a gentleman somewhere in the US, and he he connected with me, and I didn't know who he was. And a man with great vision, I would say a certain visionary. He is doing great service, and we exchanged ideas, and he was interested to know what I was doing because referred by a common person. And after 2, 3 chat sessions, we spoke to each other. And when I connected with him on the fourth time, he said this, "Sir, what you said, I'm still unable to digest that." We were talking about what is the purpose of life and that and this. And I told him that my purpose of life is to reach a state of what Buddha or Christ has reached, or what Mahavir has reached. That is my goal. I want to reach that pinnacle of perfection. And by doing that, not only would I evolve, and through my acts of unfoldment of self, I would want to serve humanity, generations to come from. Isn't that possible? What Buddha did, he walked away from his life. He was a prince, Siddhartha. He just got detached to his life. He walked away. Something hooked him up. Some thought had that power. He was enamored by that thought. As I said earlier, it's not how much you appreciate it, but does it consume your life? That thought of realization, that inquiry consumed him. That Siddhartha became Buddha. And what thereafter, generations and generations are benefited by his transformation, his evolution. How many people understood Christ? On the contrary, he was misunderstood. He was crucified in the city square, crucified on the cross. And yet, half of humanity is following what his revelations were. He shared his experience. Now, when I said that to him, he said, "Sir, I have never come across a person who says this with such clarity of thought that you have such a goal. By lifting yourself, you want to lift humanity at large, not just now, for generations to come. It may be a failed attempt. I am not guaranteeing it, as I've said, but I am very clear, dead clear. I am not being arrogant or egoistic. It is certain deep conviction by sheerly plunging your head. I have not been doing snorkeling. I have been doing deep diving. I am not being someone who is in the surface of these scriptures. Many people spend life at the surface of the water. Mere snorkeling they do. But I have been doing deep diving with the Shastras. And when you go deep into the bowels of this literature, that sentiment is very, very pure. That sentiment resonates, and which is what this verse is saying. To seek salvation. So if any one of you are enamored, if that thought inspires you, hold on to it. In fact, that very desire for liberation. You may have a desire for many things in life. We have many, many desires, isn't it? Innumerable desires, unending desires. But in the maze of those desires, there's also one desire. You know what the desire is? Can anybody guess? In the maze of all these desires, you get lost. There is one desire that is there. The question is, how strong or weak is the desire? There is the desire. Every human is born with that desire. What is that? Self-realization. Self-realization is the goal. But that desire, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just looking perhaps for the way the scriptures describe it. To know the self, to reach a goal, not any goal, reach the goal of realization. But what is that desire? Yes, Pradama Shishya, what is that desire? Desire to uplift the humanity. You should never have the desire to uplift humanity. You should have a desire to uplift yourself. The uplifting of humanity automatically happens. When you evolve, through the process of your evolution, everybody else evolves around you. Isn't it? But I understand the sentiment with which you are approaching. You're right. But it all happens within you. Now, we're all the time thinking of reforming others. But all the reformers must ask themselves, are they reformed themselves first? So if a reformer reforms himself, all the reformation process happens automatically. Vijayama says love to God, love of God. Sudhakar Garu says to be desireless. Somyama says self-satiated. All of you are right. Manasama says no rebirth. Oh, I have got someone who belongs to the club. Welcome, ma. Nobody said this. You're the only person who I've heard in 30 years of my life doesn't want to have rebirth. So we belong to a very exclusive club. No rebirth club. Manasama. I don't know if Manasama said or Krishnaswamy said. Never mind. Both of you are given credit for that. Now, what is that desire which is there in everyone amongst other desires? That desire is known as the desire for liberation, which is known as mumukshatva. I'm just penning it down so that you pick it up. Mumu is also a desire for liberation. So when we talk of bondage, here is this one desire that will liberate you from the bondage of the cycle of birth and death. So that desire you got to hold on to. Mumukshatva. Okay, Hariji has said the story of Ambika, Ambalika, and sage Agastya. She is blinded by the senses, can only see beauty at sense level, the gross level, so punished by being blinded, so that one can look inward and be one with Brahman. But yet, because of attachment, this journey to the Buddhi Guha does not happen till attachment is cut off. That is salvation. I get what you're saying. In fact, there's a story of a young monk who lived his life, a monkly life, which is to live life on dakshina. Whatever people gave, he lived life with whatever dakshina came. Means he would go door to door. Some people gave a few rupees, some people gave food, some people gave grains. So whatever came their way, they lived their life that way. They never worked to make a living. They lived a life to serve a purpose. So one day he knocked at a door, and a young lady opened the door, and she saw this monk, and she offered something, and so much so that whatever she offered was more than sufficient for the monk. So he never would go any further. He would take and go to his kutia, and then he would satisfy his basic requirement, go along with life, and they would go along with whatever the day's activities were. So day after day he used to go back to that home, and she was very welcoming and very encouraging, and offered all whatever she had with great love. One day the lady said, I'm eagerly awaiting your arrival. And to which he said, Ma, he addresses Amma, and a young lady, and he's a young monk, but he still addresses Amma. Why are you eagerly awaiting me? She said, I have fallen in love with your eyes. In the sense, I have fallen in love with your personality. To which he said nothing. He took what she gave, and he walked away. The next day, he came, and he actually plucked his eyeballs and given it to her in a tray. And he said, please take what you want, but don't become an obstacle in my journey. Look at that. He did not want to falter at any cost. So perhaps that's a similar sentiment Hariji is mentioning. So this desire for liberation uplifts you and takes you right till salvation. Let's dedicate this session for this outstanding verse. It's a beautiful message. Okay. Yes. Again, Rahulji, what you say is not any contradiction to the thought, is only from a standpoint. Now, Lord, in fact, Hanumanji resolves the apparent, please mark my words, the apparent confusion of the interpretations of three schools of thought: Dvaita, Advaita, Vishishta Advaita. So you are mentioning the Vishishta Advaita school of thought. There is no contradiction. It is just the interpretation from a certain standpoint. The truth is the same. It's not which school of thought says. Hanumanji, he says, Deha bhavena dasosmi, Jiva bhavena tvadamshakaha, Atma bhavena tvamevaham. So he says, when I look at my body, I am your servant. Hanumanji is telling to Lord Rama, when I look at my body, I am your servant. When I compare my mind, I am a part of you. You are in me, I am in you. When I consider myself, you and I are one. Can you imagine Hanuman saying to Rama that you and I are one? Atma bhavena tvamevaham. So when you say that Vishishta Advaita in the Divya Prabandham says that we do not want liberation, it is again from a certain standpoint. So don't, I would not say do's or don'ts or what you should or what you shouldn't. I would only try to appeal to you is take the broader picture of what the message is of your evolution, and it is just an interpretation from which standpoint. So that's about all. So whether Hanuman would say Hanuman was always a servant of Rama, Hanuman said he was so much consumed by Rama mentally, and also he said, you and I are one. So which standpoint you take is all that matters. Otherwise, there is no contradiction in what Dvaita, Advaita, and Vishishta Advaita say. Okay? So I appeal to you to take that perspective and the standpoint of interpretation. Otherwise, no school of thought is wrong. Right? We will conclude with the Shanti Mantra. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Shri Gurubhyo
Hari
Namaha
Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.